In this video, we're going to talk about Jesus of Nazareth and specifically about his self-understanding and the message that he proclaimed. So, as I've mentioned in previous videos, Jesus makes three primary claims about himself, and that is that he is the unique Son of God, he is the long-awaited Messiah, and he is the Son of Man. And so we're going to get into each one of those claims and some evidence that we have of that from the New Testament. So there are a lot of scripture, New Testament references throughout this slide deck. It would be very beneficial for you to have your New Testament open as you watch this video, and you can pause every once in a while and go and check out these passages. And I think that will really help your understanding of how Jesus uses these titles. Okay, the first claim is Jesus says that he is the unique Son of God, or the Son of God. Now, we see this title used in the Old Testament, and it's not always used in this extraordinary sense like Jesus uses it. So in the Old Testament, we see the Son of God title attributed to angels, to kings, to the whole people of Israel. But then with Jesus, his use of this title is more nuanced. So first, he claims that he has special knowledge of the Father. He uses the word Abba, which means something a little more personal than father, maybe dad. And you can definitely check out those references. But basically, Jesus is making the claim that he is the actual, true Son of God, not just this symbolic relationship that people in the Old Testament had attributed to them. And then the last one is that there's the equation of himself with the beloved Son. And once again, that points to a personal relationship between God the Father and Jesus. And then lastly, the Son of God is the same. It's pointing to the same person or identity of Messiah or King, which we've talked extensively about. And then Paul actually applies this to Jesus in Acts. Okay, the next one, the claim that Jesus is the Messiah. We've talked about this, but I want to go over this because this is something that is often missed when you are reading through the New Testament, because a lot of times when we think of Jesus, specifically in Christian circles, it becomes a conversation of what does Jesus mean to me? What does Jesus, how does his work and ministry affect me? And what we first need to look at, no matter where we fall on the authority we place Jesus having in our own life, we need to first understand Jesus as the Messiah and what that meant situated in the context of the Jewish people, the Israelites, throughout the Old Testament. So, like we covered in a previous video, the four messianic themes and expectations that the Jews were looking for in a Messiah was first that the Messiah would be the true King of the Jews, which included that he would be ethnically Jewish. Second, he would come in and defeat the pagans. He would be a sort of underdog, and he would come in and take care of all these other worldly powers. Third, he would rebuild, cleanse, take charge of the temple. So the temple would be restored to what it was supposed to be, and the people could worship God as intended. And then finally, the Messiah is to bring God-given justice and peace to the world, not just to the Jews, but to the world. And so we can see throughout the New Testament that Jesus accepted the title of Messiah, he confessed it under oath that he was the Messiah, and he acted like the Messiah. And so we're going to dive into each one of those. Okay, first, Jesus accepted the title of Messiah. In each of the four Gospels, we have this account of Jesus is with his disciples, and he's asking them. He asked them, "Who do you say that I am?" So they're talking about who others are saying he is. Is he a prophet? Is he the Messiah? Who is this Jesus person? And Jesus says, "Well, who do you, my disciples, say that I am?" And so Peter responds, one of Jesus's closest disciples. And so we get Peter's response. It's recorded in all four of the Gospels. And so Peter responds to Jesus, and we see Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all four account for Peter saying that Jesus was the Messiah, and Jesus does not reject that. Jesus accepts that title. Okay, Jesus confessed under oath that he was the Messiah. So at the end of the gospel accounts, when we come to Jesus being arrested and going to trial, being crucified, at one point while he's on trial, he is asked about his identity. There's a quote there: "I adjure you before the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God." And the synoptic gospels all record him confessing while he is on trial, confessing to the Sanhedrin that he is in fact the Christ, the Son of God. And then lastly, Jesus acted like the Messiah. So think back to how there are all of these Old Testament allusions and prophecies to what the Messiah would be like when he came, and how there were all of these, we talked about the four main expectations, but there were all of these smaller expectations that were built around those Old Testament prophecies. And so all of these bullet points are things that Jesus did that fulfill those Old Testament prophecies and show that he was acting in the role of Messiah, that he did the things that the people were looking for the Messiah to do. And that includes the triumphal entry into Jerusalem, the cleansing and symbolic destruction of the temple, forgiving sins, casting out demons, and claiming to have authority over Satan, and then also claiming to have authority over the Sabbath. Okay, and then the last main title is Son of Man. And this was actually Jesus' favorite title that he referred to himself as. It occurs 69 times in the Synoptic Gospels and 13 times in John. And all but two of these are Jesus speaking about himself rather than someone calling him that. So this title doesn't have the same messianic connotation that the other two titles do. It does occur in the Old Testament in the prophetic book of Daniel, which is apocalyptic in nature, sort of like Revelation that we will study. But it's referring to the end times, and it's talking about this Son of Man that will come and rule. And so Jesus is able to use this title to kind of reveal pieces of his identity a little bit at a time through the use of this title. And so he used this much more than he did Messiah. So he kind of kept the direct claim of being the Messiah a little more under wraps. He didn't generally reveal himself as Messiah. Okay, we see some common themes in Jesus' teaching. The first theme is the two greatest commandments, and Jesus teaches that the first is to love God with all of your head, heart, soul, mind, strength. And then the second is to love your neighbor. So love God, love others. The next one is principles, not rules. And the scripture reference is Matthew 5, which is the Sermon on the Mount. It is one of the primary discourses or teaching moments in the Gospel of Matthew. And basically, Jesus in this passage is not making rules for the people or trying to give this people, like, here's your list of do's and don'ts. He's rather giving principles and ways of living for those that are a part of the kingdom, that are following him. The next one is inverted social code. So one of the main themes about that we find in the Gospel of Luke is how Jesus' message goes out to all people, not just to Jews, but to Gentiles. But more than that, there seems to be this emphasis on the gospel message going out to the unexpected people, like those that are sick, those that are outcast, those that are women, those that, all of these that don't really fit into like your cookie cutter Jew or Gentile. Jesus wants to show in his message that salvation is for everyone. It is available for all. So whatever it is that sets you apart, that makes you think you're unworthy, Jesus teaches, hey, salvation is for even those that think they are unworthy or weird or different or, whatever. And then the last one is that the internals are more important than the external. And this is another reference back to the Sermon on the Mount. There's just, the Sermon on the Mount is packed full of Jesus's teachings on what it means to be a disciple, to be a follower of Jesus. And one of the main things he's doing here is he's comparing those that are followers of Jesus, that are living in the kingdom, and those that are a part of the current day's religious establishment. So they were the Pharisees, the scribes, the teachers of the law. And he points to the corruption of these groups because they are so consumed by making sure that everything looks good on the outside, that they are holding to rigidly reserving the law, but on the inside, their hearts are not clean. So they try to make themselves look good on the outside, but have not surrendered to the way of the kingdom on the inside. And so Jesus paints this picture about how your attitude, your intention, your motives are what first is important, and not just the action. So you need to have a clean heart in order to have a true clean exterior as well, to have true clean actions. And then finally, some of Jesus's teaching methods. So Jesus was a speaker, not a writer. So we don't have books or anything like that of what Jesus taught on, but we have the oral tradition that the disciples then recorded. So his goal was to challenge, similar to, like I was saying about Jesus not giving rules but giving principles. He wanted to challenge the people in a way that that would challenge them to step up and live differently in the context of the corruption of the religious establishment of the time. He uses a lot of creative linguistics like buried meanings, paradoxes, hyperbole. So that's specifically important when you're reading through the Gospels and you're reading Jesus' teachings, that you don't just take the text with you don't just try to find the meaning of the text in this quick flyby reading, but you have to orient yourself in the kinds of ways that Jesus is teaching. So where is it that Jesus uses hyperbole, or where is it that he uses paradox? Or the next one, these familiar forms like parables and illustrations. So you have to pay attention to those to really get the full depth of what he is teaching. And then that also goes along with proverbial and Old Testament allusions. Okay, so that just shows how you've got to go to the original context if you really want to understand what it is that Jesus is teaching. So that wraps up the first part of this kind of video series, was showing who was the Messiah and what did the Jewish people think he was going to be like. And then now in this video, we've talked about how Jesus himself is claiming to be the Messiah, the Son of God, and the Son of Man. And then we touched on, what were his main themes when he was teaching, and how did he teach. So hopefully that will help you guys. I hope you can keep these, kind of consider these as you read through the New Testament, so that this can be kind of the lens in which you read Jesus's teaching discourses and his ministry as a whole.